The massive archive hall stretched endlessly before Lyra, its crystalline walls housing millions of data crystals that glowed with a soft blue light. Her four-fingered hands traced the ancient markings on the crystal she held, her silver eyes reflecting the stored knowledge within. "Humans," she muttered, her scaled skin shimmering under the archive lights. "Always humans." As the youngest researcher in the Galactic Historical Society, Lyra had been tasked with organizing and analyzing ancient war records. Her current project focused on the legendary human warriors who had supposedly fought in the Great War centuries ago. The stories seemed too incredible to be true. The data crystal in her hands projected its contents into the air. Images of bipedal beings fighting against impossible odds flickered before her. According to the records, a single human warrior had once held off an entire platoon of claw forces for 3 days straight. Another account told of humans fighting on despite severe injuries that would have killed any other species. "Propaganda," Lyra said, setting down the crystal. "It has to be." Her supervisor, Master Reed, floated into the room. His jellyfish-like body pulsed with gentle lights as he approached. "Still doubting the old records, young one?" "Master Reed, these accounts make no sense." Lyra gestured at the floating images. "No species could survive these conditions. Look at this, fighting with broken bones, continuing after losing blood. It's physically impossible." "Is it?" Master Reed's lights flickered in amusement. "Remember, young one, humans evolved on a death world. Their planet Earth had high gravity, extreme temperature variations, and countless predators." Lyra flicked her tail in frustration. "But they were primitive compared to other species. No natural armor, no claws, limited senses. How could they have been such fearsome warriors?" "Perhaps that's exactly why," Master Reed responded. "They had to become stronger because they started with less." Before Lyra could argue further, her communication crystal chimed. She pressed it, and a holographic message appeared. Her heart raced as she read the contents. "Master Reed," she exclaimed, "the Exploration Corps has found something. An ancient space station at the edge of the Void Sector. They're requesting a historian to join their investigation team." Master Reed's lights pulsed faster. "The Void Sector? That's where the last human fleets were seen before they vanished." "Surely you don't believe?" Lyra started. "I believe this is an excellent opportunity for you to conduct first-hand research," Master Reed interrupted. "Perhaps seeing evidence yourself will help you understand the truth about humans better than these records." Lyra looked at the message again. The deep space mission would advance her career significantly, yet something about the Void Sector made her scales tingle with unease. The region had a dark reputation. Ships disappeared there, and the few that returned often carried crews driven mad by what they'd seen. "I'll take the assignment," she decided. After all, she was a scientist. Fear of old stories had no place in her work. Master Reed helped her gather research equipment, including specialized scanning crystals and recording devices. As she packed, he handed her one last data crystal. "Take this," he said. "It contains personal accounts from various species who fought alongside humans during the Great War. You may find it useful." Lyra accepted the crystal reluctantly. "You really believe humans were as powerful as the stories say?" "I believe," Master Reed's lights dimmed slightly, "that there are forces in this galaxy we still don't understand. The human strength wasn't in their bodies, but in something else. Something that made them keep fighting when any rational being would have surrendered." Looking at the crystal in her hand, Lyra wondered what she would find on that ancient station. Part of her hoped to prove all these legends wrong, to show they were just stories exaggerated over time. But a smaller, quieter part of her wondered what it would be like to meet a real human warrior, to see if the legends were true. She had no idea that in a few days she would find out exactly what made humans so legendary, and why the galaxy still whispered their names in awe and fear. The ancient space station loomed before their research vessel, a dark giant against the stars. Lyra stood at the viewing window, her tail twitching with nervous excitement as she studied the massive structure. Despite being centuries old, the station showed no signs of structural damage. "Scans show breathable atmosphere inside," announced Trill, their pilot, his insectoid mandibles clicking. "Power systems still running at minimal levels. How is that possible after all this time?" Lyra checked her datapad. Human engineering was surprisingly durable. They built things to last. The research team consisted of 5 members: Lyra, Trill, 2 security officers named Cax and Mira, and their team leader, Dr. Voss. As they docked with the station, Lyra noticed how Dr. Voss's tentacles kept curling and uncurling, a sign of stress in his species. "Remember," Dr. Voss warned as they prepared to board, "this station has been abandoned for centuries. We follow standard exploration protocols. No separating from the group." They entered through an airlock that hissed open with surprising ease. Their lights illuminated long corridors covered in layers of dust. Lyra's scanner hummed as it recorded everything around them. "These markings," she said, studying the walls. "They're in human writing. This was definitely one of their military stations." As they moved deeper into the station, Lyra noticed something odd. Some areas had less dust than others. Some corridors showed signs of recent use. "Dr. Voss," she called out, "look at this." Before she could point out her discovery, a distant sound echoed through the station. Metal hitting metal, like footsteps on the deck plates. "We're not alone here," Cax growled, raising his weapon. His protective scales bristled. "Impossible," Dr. Voss said. "This station has been abandoned since." A loud crash interrupted him. Red emergency lights suddenly flashed to life, and an alarm began blaring through the station. "Multiple contacts," Mira shouted, checking her scanner. "Coming from all directions." Lyra's heart raced as dark shapes appeared at both ends of the corridor. They weren't human. Their forms were too twisted, too predatory. Raiders, space pirates who preyed on abandoned stations and ships. "Run," Dr. Voss ordered. They fled down a side passage as energy bolts struck the walls around them. Lyra could hear the raiders' hunting cries behind them, a sound that had terrified spacers for generations. In their panic to escape, they took random turns. The station became a maze of corridors and sealed doors. Somewhere in the chaos, Lyra got separated from the others. She found herself in what looked like an old command center, filled with dead screens and silent consoles. Her communication crystal wasn't working. Something in the station's walls was blocking the signal. Footsteps approached. Lyra ducked behind a console, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her scales changed color to match her surroundings, a defense mechanism her species had evolved long ago. The footsteps stopped just on the other side of her hiding spot. She held her breath, praying to the ancient stars that the raiders would pass by. Then a voice spoke, not the harsh growls of the raiders, but something else, something impossible. "I know you're there," the voice said. "Come out slowly. I won't hurt you." It was speaking trade language, but with an accent Lyra had only heard in historical recordings. Her scales prickled with shock as she realized what that meant. Slowly, she stood up. On the other side of the console stood a figure she had only seen in ancient records. Bictal, soft-skinned, no natural weapons or armor, but the way it stood, the look in its eyes, everything about it radiated a quiet strength that made her scales tremble. A human, a living, breathing human. "How?" she whispered. Before the human could answer, more raider cries echoed through the station. The human's expression hardened as it. "No," he checked a primitive but deadly-looking weapon in his hands. "Questions later," he said. "Right now, we need to move. Unless you want to meet the raiders up close." Lyra had a choice to make. Trust this legendary warrior, or face the raiders alone. She chose the legend. The human moved through the station's corridors like a shadow, each step silent despite his size. Lyra followed, trying to match his stealth, but failing as her claws clicked against the metal floor. "I'm Tom," he whispered as they paused at an intersection. He wore dark clothing that seemed patched together from various materials, and a bandana kept his short hair out of his eyes. "You're from the research team that just docked, right?" Lyra nodded, still struggling to believe she was actually talking to a human. "I'm Lyra. How are you here?" Humans were supposed to be extinct after the Great War. Tom's mouth twitched in what she recognized from her studies as a smile. "Not extinct, just hiding. The galaxy thought we were too dangerous to let live, so we let them think they'd won." A scream echoed through the corridors. One of the raiders had found prey. Tom's expression changed instantly, his face hardening into something that made Lyra understand why humans were feared. "Your team members," he said. "We need to help them." But the raiders are about to learn why humans have a reputation. They moved toward the sounds of fighting. Tom led her through maintenance tunnels she wouldn't have noticed, showing an intimate knowledge of the station's layout. When they reached a larger chamber, they found two raiders cornering Mira against a sealed door. What happened next burned itself into Lyra's memory forever. Tom burst from cover, moving faster than something his size should be able to. The raiders turned, but they were too slow. He dropped the first one with a precise shot from his weapon, then closed the distance to the second before it could react. The raider was larger, stronger, naturally armored. None of that mattered. Tom moved like water, ducking under its claws and striking at points Lyra wouldn't have considered vulnerable. The raider went down hard. "Are you hurt?" he asked Mira, who stared at him with the same shock Lyra had felt. More raiders were coming. They could hear them approaching from multiple directions. "Follow me," Tom ordered. "I know a safe place." He led them through more hidden passages until they reached what looked like an old storage room, converted into a living space. Simple but effective defenses covered the entrance. "The others from your team are probably heading for the main docking bay," Tom said as he checked his weapon. "That's where the raiders will expect them to go, which means that's exactly where we don't want to be." "How do you know so much about fighting?" Lyra asked, remembering the way he had moved in battle. "All humans know how to fight," he replied. "We had to learn. Our world taught us that lesson early: survive or die. When we reached the stars, we found the galaxy wasn't much different." Lyra thought about the ancient texts she had studied. The records say humans could keep fighting even when badly injured, that you ignored pain that would stop other species. Tom checked the corridor before answering. "Pain is just information. Sometimes you need to override that information to survive, to protect others." "Is that what you're doing now? Protecting us?" "It's what humans do." He said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. "We protect those who need protection. Fight for those who can't fight for themselves." A distant explosion rocked the station. Tom's expression turned grim. "Your friends are in trouble," he said. "The raiders are using sonic weapons. I can hear the frequency. They're trying to herd everyone into a trap." "Can we help them?" Mira asked, speaking for the first time since her rescue. Tom nodded, checking his equipment one last time. "We can, but you'll have to trust me and do exactly what I say." Lyra looked at this human warrior, this living legend, and realized why her people had both feared and respected his species. It wasn't just their ability to fight. It was their unflinching willingness to help others, to face danger for people they'd just met. "We trust you," she said. Tom's smile returned, but this time it was different. The smile of a warrior about to go into battle. "Then let's go save your team. Keep your body low," Tom instructed as they crept through the station's maintenance tunnels. "And watch where you put your feet. Sound travels through metal." Lyra tried to copy his movements, amazed at how quietly such a large being could move. Beside her, Mira was doing better, her natural agility helping her adapt to Tom's lessons. "The raiders have better hearing than both your species," Tom explained in a whisper, "but they rely on it too much. Makes them vulnerable to distractions." He pulled something from his pocket, a small device that looked handmade. "This will emit a high-frequency pulse. When I activate it, they'll be disoriented. That's when we move. How did humans learn to fight like this? Lyra asked as they paused at a junction. Tom checked around the corner before answering. Earth was never a gentle planet. Everything there could kill you. Weather, animals, even the plants. We had to learn to survive against stronger predators. Had to become smarter, more creative. A patrol of raiders passed above them. Tom held perfectly still, not even breathing until they were gone. Your historical records, he continued once it was safe. They'd probably tell about our wars, our weapons. But they missed the important part. Humans don't fight because we love violence. We fight because sometimes it's necessary to protect what matters. They reached a section of the station where the walls were scarred with old plasma burns. Tom touched the marks reverently. This happened during the Great War, he said. A human squad held this corridor against an entire enemy battalion, not because they were bloodthirsty. They did it to buy time for civilian ships to escape. Lyra remembered reading about that battle. The records had seemed impossible. 12 humans against hundreds of enemies. Now, watching Tom navigate the battlefield of his ancestors, she began to understand. "Stop," Tom suddenly whispered. He pointed to a seemingly solid wall. "Watch this." His fingers found hidden catches, and a panel slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. Humans built secret paths throughout the station, he explained. Always have a backup plan. Always know your escape routes. These are the things that keep you alive. They crawled through the passage, emerging near the station's power core. The hum of ancient machinery filled the air. "Your friends will be held somewhere close to here," Tom said. "Raiders always set up near power sources. They need it for their equipment." "How do we fight them?" Mira asked. "They're bigger, stronger. Size isn't everything." Tom smiled. "Humans learned that lesson long ago. Watch." He demonstrated a series of movements, showing them how to use an attacker's strength against them. Lyra was surprised at how simple yet effective the techniques were. "The galaxy thinks humans are just tough, that we can take more damage than others," Tom said as they practiced. "But that's not our real strength. We're adaptable. We learn. We teach others. That's how we survived when everything was trying to kill us." A distant alarm sounded. Tom immediately tensed, listening. "They're moving your people," he said. "Probably to their ship. We need to move fast." "Are we ready?" Lyra asked, suddenly unsure. Tom looked at her with those strange human eyes that seemed to see right through her. "No one's ever completely ready," he said. "But that's another human lesson. Sometimes you have to act even when you're scared. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's necessary despite your fear." He checked his weapon one last time. "Remember what I taught you. Move quietly. Use their strength against them. And most importantly," he paused, making sure they were paying attention. "Watch out for each other. That's the most human thing you can do." Lyra nodded, feeling strangely confident despite the danger ahead. In just a short time, this human warrior had taught her more than years of studying ancient texts. "Ready?" Tom asked. Both Lyra and Mira nodded. They had learned from a legend, and now it was time to put those lessons to use. "Then let's go show the raiders why humans were never just legends." Tom's distraction device worked perfectly. When it activated, the raiders guarding the captured research team clutched their heads in pain, their enhanced hearing becoming a weakness. In that moment of chaos, Tom moved. Lyra watched in amazement as he took down 3 raiders before they could recover. Her own claws found their mark on a 4th, using the techniques he had taught her. Beside her, Mira moved with surprising speed, helping free the rest of their team. "More coming," Dr. Voss warned as his tentacles detected vibrations through the station's structure. "This way," Tom directed, leading them through another hidden passage. They emerged in a large circular room filled with old communications equipment. "We can hold them here." Cax, the security officer, checked his weapon. "Why not run? We could reach our ship. They have a cruiser in orbit, Tom explained while barricading the doors. You wouldn't make it past their guns. We need to convince them this station isn't worth the cost. Sudden impacts shook the doors. The raiders had found them. Trill, Dr. Voss, Tom called out. Those consoles still work. Can you access the station's defense systems? The two scientists rushed to the ancient equipment. Lyra helped Tom secure their position, remembering everything he had taught her about defensive positioning. How many raiders are there? She asked. At least 30, Tom replied, setting up firing positions. But numbers aren't everything. This room has only 2 entrances. We can hold them. The first door burst open. Raiders poured in, but Tom was ready. His shots were precise, dropping the leaders. Lyra and the others fought back, working together just as he had shown them. Defense systems online, Trill announced. Ancient turrets emerged from the walls, their targeting systems still functional after centuries of dormancy. Tom grinned. Humans always build redundancies, always have a backup plan. More raiders came. The battle became intense. Lyra saw Tom take a hit but keep fighting. She understood now. It wasn't that humans didn't feel pain. They simply refused to let it stop them. We need more time, Dr. Voss called out. The main defense grid is still powering up. Tom nodded, making a decision. Cover the other entrance. I'll hold this one. Alone? Lyra asked, remembering the ancient texts about single human warriors holding off armies. It's what we do, he said simply, then moved to position. What followed would have seemed impossible if Lyra hadn't seen it herself. Tom became a force of nature, using every trick, every technique, every bit of cover to maximum effect. Raiders fell back, regrouped, tried different tactics. Nothing worked. When they brought up heavy weapons, Tom adapted. When they tried to flank him, he was already moving to counter. Every time Lyra thought he would be overwhelmed, he found another way to keep fighting. Main defenses ready. Trill shouted over the chaos. Now, Tom ordered. The station's ancient defense systems roared to life. Energy fields activated, cutting off the raiders' advance. Automated systems targeted their positions. In the confusion, more humans emerged from hidden passages, survivors who had been waiting for this moment. The raiders found themselves caught between defending humans and awakening machines. Their confidence broke. They retreated, first in small groups, then in a rush. They're running back to their ship, one of the newly arrived humans reported. Tom finally lowered his weapon, showing the first signs of fatigue. They won't be back. Raiders don't like targets that fight too hard. Lyra approached him, seeing the injuries he had ignored during the fight. You're hurt. He shrugged. Nothing serious. Had worse during training. The other humans were already helping the research team, treating injuries, sharing supplies. Just like Tom, they seemed to instinctively want to help. The legends were true, Lyra said quietly, about human warriors, about everything. Tom looked at her, his expression serious. The legends talk about our fighting, but that's not what makes humans special. It's why we fight that matters. Around them, humans and aliens work together, just as they had in the ancient days before the Great War. Lyra realized she was watching history repeat itself, but this time, perhaps with a better ending. The raiders' retreat was short-lived. Their cruiser dropped more troops onto the station, determined to take revenge for their earlier defeat. They're insulted, Tom explained as he watched the tactical display. Raiders hate losing, especially to what they think is a weak target. The combined group of humans and researchers had fortified their position in the station's central hub. More human survivors had joined them, bringing their total to 15. Against them, the raiders had deployed over 100 warriors. Can we win against so many? Lyra asked, helping to distribute weapons and supplies. Tom turned to address everyone. Numbers aren't everything. We have better position, better knowledge of the station, and something they don't have. A reason to fight beyond greed. The first wave hit them from multiple directions. The raiders had learned from their earlier defeat, attacking with coordinated teams and heavy weapons. But the humans were ready. Lyra watched in awe as the station's defenders demonstrated why their species had become legendary. Each human seemed to know exactly what to do, moving with practiced efficiency. They fought not as individuals, but as a single unit. Tom led from the front, calling out targets and coordinating the defense. When a raider breached their line, he was there. When someone needed support, he appeared as if by magic. His earlier injuries seemed forgotten. This is what the texts meant, Lyra realized as she fought alongside them. Humans don't just endure pain. They draw strength from it. The battle intensified. Raiders deployed sonic weapons, trying to disorient the defenders. The humans responded by using the station's architecture to redirect the sound waves back at their attackers. Creativity, Tom had told her. That's humanity's real weapon. He proved it by leading a small team through maintenance shafts to flank the raiders' position. The surprise attack broke their momentum, forcing them to fall back and regroup. During a brief lull, Lyra helped treat the wounded. She noticed how the injured humans insisted others be helped first, even with serious wounds. "Why do you do that?" she asked one of them. "Do what?" "Put others before yourselves, even when you're hurt." The human smiled through his pain. "Because that's what makes us human." The raiders launched their final assault with everything they had. They breached walls, cut through decks, and came at the defenders from all sides. What followed would be told in stories for generations. The humans fought with a determination that bordered on impossible. When their weapons ran low, they improvised. When the raiders adapted, they changed tactics. Tom seemed to be everywhere at once, rallying defenders, coordinating attacks, protecting the wounded. Lyra fought beside him, using everything he had taught her. This is what the legends meant by human warriors, she thought as she watched him take down 3 raiders single-handedly. Not just their strength or skill, but their absolute refusal to give up. The turning point came when Dr. Voss and Trill managed to reactivate the station's ancient reactor core. The surge of power activated defensive systems that had been dormant for centuries. The raiders found themselves trapped between determined defenders and awakening machines. Their formation broke. This time, their retreat wasn't tactical, it was pure flight. When the last raider ship disappeared into hyperspace, the station fell silent. The defenders looked at each other, barely believing they had won. Lyra found Tom treating others' wounds, ignoring his own. "You fought incredible battles in the Great War," she said. "Why did your people go into hiding?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because the galaxy feared us. They saw our strength but didn't understand it. Didn't understand that humans don't fight for glory or conquest." "What do you fight for?" Tom gestured at the humans and aliens working together to treat wounds and repair damage. "For this, for the chance to protect others, to help them. That's what makes a true warrior. Not how many enemies they can defeat, but how many friends they can save." Lyra looked around at the battlefield, understanding at last why the legends of human warriors had endured for so long. It wasn't their combat prowess that made them legendary. It was their hearts. 3 months after the battle for the station, Lyra stood before the Galactic Council, her research data crystal glowing in her hand. The great chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of species, all drawn by news of humanity's survival. The ancient texts weren't exaggerated. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the chamber. If anything, they understated the truth about human warriors. The crystal projected images of the battle, showing how a handful of humans had defended the station against overwhelming odds. Many council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But we misunderstood something fundamental about humans," Lyra continued. "We thought they were warriors because they loved fighting. The truth is very different." Tom stood at the back of the chamber, along with other human representatives. They had finally agreed to reveal themselves to the galaxy, hoping for a better outcome this time. "Humans fight to protect," Lyra explained. "They fight for others, not for themselves." I saw them risk their lives for people they had just met. I saw them treat enemies with mercy. I saw them put others' needs before their own. She played recordings of humans helping the wounded, sharing supplies, teaching others to defend themselves. The council chamber was silent, absorbing this new perspective on a species they had feared for centuries. The old records speak of human warriors holding off armies, she said. They tell of humans fighting through impossible injuries, of never giving up. But they don't tell you why. They don't tell you about their hearts. Tom stepped forward when invited, his presence causing a stir among the council members. Some still remembered the Great War, still carried old fears. We went into hiding because the galaxy wasn't ready to understand us, he addressed the council. You saw our strength but missed its purpose. Humans aren't warriors because we love war. We're warriors because sometimes fighting is necessary to protect what matters. One by one, Lyra's research team members stood to share their experiences. They told of humans teaching them, protecting them, treating them as equals despite centuries of mistrust. The humans could have left us to the raiders, Dr. Voss testified. Instead, they risked everything to save us. That's not the action of a species that deserves to be feared. The council deliberated for days. Finally, they reached a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Humanity would be welcomed back into galactic society. The old fears would be replaced by new understanding. Human colonies would no longer need to hide. After the decision, Lyra found Tom looking out at the stars from the council station's observation deck. What will you do now? She asked. What humans have always done. He smiled. Explore. Learn. Help where we can. There's a whole galaxy out there that needs protecting. Lyra showed him her latest project, a new historical record she was writing. I'm calling it The True Nature of Human Warriors. It's not just about your fighting skills. It's about your spirit. And what have you concluded about our spirit? Tom asked. That it's not your strength that makes you special, she replied. It's your humanity, your willingness to fight not for yourselves, but for others, your ability to turn enemies into friends. As if to prove her point, reports were already coming in from across the galaxy. Hidden human colonies were emerging, bringing with them centuries of accumulated knowledge and innovation. But more importantly, they'd brought their unique perspective, their drive to protect, to help, to make things better. The legends will change now, Lyra said. When people tell stories of human warriors, they won't just speak of your battles. They'll speak of your hearts. Tom nodded, watching as ships from dozens of species docked at the council station. Among them were human vessels, no longer hiding in the shadows. That's all we ever wanted, he said, not to be feared as warriors, but to be understood as protectors. Lyra looked at her friend, the human warrior who had changed her understanding of an entire species. The legends had been right about human strength, but they had missed the most important part. Humans weren't legendary because they were great warriors. They were legendary because they were human. And now, finally, the galaxy was ready to understand what that truly meant.